Some WWE stars seem destined for main event status. It might be from their ability to get over with the crowd. Or maybe they're getting a push that seems like they're headed in that direction. Or maybe they just look the part. However, WWE won't think twice about crushing the dreams of its workers. This is WrestleSpy, and today we're taking a look at 10 future main eventers that WWE cruelly held back. Hit subscribe for awesome wrestling content. Number 10. Dolph Ziggler. Now going by his real name Nick Nemeth in TNA, Dolph Ziggler was a wrestler that time and again showed the crowd that he was more than capable of putting on stellar matches while being entertaining at the same time. However, in his 19-year career in the WWE, he never quite got the main event push he deserved. Outside of 2 brief reigns as World Heavyweight Champion, WWE never really committed to taking the ball and running with Ziggler as a main eventer. In a recent interview on Talk is Jericho, Ziggler revealed that WWE legend Pat Patterson was a big advocate for him in the writers' room. This led the writers to book Ziggler and lose just to see what kind of reaction Pat Patterson would have. It's booking decisions like this and WWE's overall non-committal treatment of his character that have led many to believe that Ziggler was a missed opportunity. Number 9. Alex Riley. First appearing on the second season of the game show version of NXT, Alex Riley had all of the right boxes checked off for an eventual climb up the card. He had the right look, he could put on good matches, and he was good on the mic. It also helped that he was partnered up with The Miz, which elevated his character right out of the gate. So what happened? 2 things halted the rise of Alex Riley. The big one, and probably the most well-known reason, was that in an interview after his release in 2016, Riley claimed that there was an issue between him and John Cena that ultimately led to Cena using his pull to stop Riley's push. The other issue that is also overlooked is that at the time Riley was getting his singles push, a certain Summer of Punk took the wrestling world by storm, stopping the momentum of many pushes in the process. Number 8. Keith Lee. Talk about a wrestler who's got almost all the trademarks of greatness. While some might criticize his physique, Keith Lee has been a performer who has proven that he can outshine his contemporaries in just about every other category. While he was a revelation during his time in NXT, Keith Lee's stint on the main roster of WWE is best left to be forgotten. He started hot with a feud with Randy Orton before his push slowly went off the rails. To be fair, some of this wasn't all WWE's doing. While Lee slid down the card after his initial push, due to the infamous 3-week push period of Vince booking the show during the pandemic, in early 2021, he contracted COVID, which was followed by heart inflammation, leading to him having to stay out of action for half a year until he got the okay from doctors to perform again. However, you can't blame COVID for being given the nickname Bearcat when he returned. This new alias didn't help him, and he was eventually released in November of 2021. He would jump to AEW in early 2022 after his non-compete clause was up, and while his early days there seemed more promising, AEW seems to be dropping the ball with him just as much. Number 7. Christian. While he might be doing some of the best work of his career right now in AEW, Christian is a wrestler that WWE has time and again failed to pull the trigger on when it comes to being a main eventer. While he's another wrestler on this list who can lay claim to having a couple of short stints with the World Heavyweight Champion, he was never the guy WWE went with to main event in any significant capacity. This is most likely due to Vince's famous dislike of Christian. One story claims that when Christian first received his singles push in the mid-2000s, Vince wanted to cover up his face with a blue dot so no one could look at him. While Christian has proven time and again outside of the WWE that he's more than capable, WWE's hatred has kept him out of the coveted main event slot. Number 6. Dusty Rhodes. Before joining the WWE in 1989, Dusty Rhodes was a former 3-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion and was one of the faces of the National Wrestling Alliance. Since the NWA was WWE's biggest rival at the time, when they had the chance to humiliate them, they took the opportunity. Dusty Rhodes was no longer the American dream, where he wined and dined with kings and queens and slept in alleys eating pork and beans. He was the common man wearing polka dots and dancing around the ring. While in WWE for this 2-year stint, he never challenged for the top prize and was treated as a mid-carder. Instead of the main eventer, he was in the NWA. After 2 years, he left to return to WCW as head booker. In a later interview, when asked about what he thought about the polka dots, he was quoted as saying, "I didn't care. While everyone was laughing at me, I was laughing all the way to the bank. Number 5. Wade Barrett. The winner of the first season of the game show version of NXT, Wade Barrett received a massive push out of the gate. Not only was the Nexus the hottest storyline in the summer of 2010, but Wade himself was front and center for it all. Despite the Nexus receiving a controversial loss at SummerSlam of that year, Wade Barrett entered into a feud with John Cena, receiving a handful of wins in the process. However, at TLC 2010, Barrett would receive the first of many burials, including literally being buried under 23 chairs in the match. Barrett would continue to slip down the card with angles like the Core, the Barrett Barrage, and a forgettable couple of stints as Intercontinental Champion before starting to get over with the Bad News Barrett gimmick, where he'd slam a gavel and deliver bad news to superstars. In an interview with Inside the Ropes at 2017, Barrett claimed that Vince McMahon wanted to keep him as a heel, so he eventually took away all of the things that people were reacting to, making him just another generic heel. In the same interview, he also claimed that he was supposed to win the Money in the Bank briefcase in 2011 before it was decided to have Daniel Bryan win it instead. Barrett would also win the King of the Ring tournament in 2015 as a push to get people to sign up for the WWE Network. After the King Barrett character went nowhere, the last gasp of a push Barrett received was the League of Nations, which ended up also going nowhere. Going back to that Inside the Ropes interview, Barrett stated that when it came to renewing his contract, WWE was actually interested in keeping him on and paying him more money, but he ultimately walked away from WWE due to the many frustrations with creative they had with him over the years. After being away for 4 years, Barrett would eventually make his way back to the WWE as a commentator, first for NXT before moving up to the main roster in 2022. Number 4. Damien Sandow. The intellectual savior of the masses had all of the right tools to make his way to the top of the card and was getting the crowd's reaction to match. How Damien Sandow went from one of the most popular acts in the company to being out of the company a couple of years later is heartbreaking, to say the least. After winning the SmackDown Money in the Bank briefcase in 2013, he would go on to notoriously be the first wrestler to fail to win on a cash-in. Most people credit John Cena as the first failed cash-in, but he won his match but didn't win the title due to a DQ. Sandow was the first to cash in and lose his match. From there, he would get lost in the mix before becoming the Miz's stunt double, dubbing himself Damien Mizdow. This comedy angle also started to garner positive reactions from the audience, especially due to Damien's comedic timing and how committed he was to the role. WWE then set a storyline into place that led to The Miz getting jealous. The payoff for this storyline ended with The Miz getting a clean victory over Sandow in an episode of Raw. Sandow would continue to slip down the card, teaming with Curtis Axel as the Meta Powers, where Sandow was a Macho Man impersonator while Axel was a Hulk Hogan impersonator. The team was never treated like anything serious, and Sandow would eventually get released in 2016, where he would go on to perform in TNA and the NWA before retiring in 2022. Number 3. Finn Balor. While the Judgment Day might be one of the most over acts in the WWE at the moment, Finn Balor has had a bumpy road where WWE still hasn't pulled the trigger on him. His 2 years in NXT were phenomenal, and his matches were part of what made the Black and Gold brand the show to watch between 2014 and 2016. His main roster run has been stop-start at best. First, he became the first ever Universal Champion, before immediately vacating it the next night due to an injury suffered during the match. After coming back from the injury, the next couple of years wouldn't be super notable for Balor, outside of a reunion with former Bullet Club cohorts Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. In 2018, he'd win the Intercontinental Championship and truthfully, not much else of note. In 2019, he became a victim of the then debuting character of The Fiend. In the back end of 2019, Balor would make his return to NXT, and over the next 2 years, re-establish himself as the force to be reckoned with that he was in NXT just a few years prior. He even won his second NXT championship in the process. Upon being called back up to the main roster, he lost 2 matches against God Mode Roman Reigns, including the infamous match where the ropes broke and Balor did a faceplant in the middle of the ring. It wasn't until his current run with the Judgment Day that Balor seemed to be back on solid footing, winning the tag titles twice with Damian Priest last year. However, despite all of this, and a hinted wedge between Balor and Priest over who should challenge for the World Heavyweight Championship, Any solid plans of having Balor break out of the pack and win the big one have yet to materialize. Number 2. Zack Ryder. The man who went from the bottom of the card to having arenas chant his name. In the early 2010s, Zack Ryder was able to leverage the power of social media to get himself over like no other superstar had been able to do before. His Z True Long Island Story YouTube show went viral as his little skits and inside digs entertained wrestling fans. WWE dragged their feet on utilizing this until they just couldn't anymore, finally having Zack Ryder win the United States Championship at TLC 2011. This, however, would be as far as WWE would be willing to entertain the idea, as they slowly began to bury him with a love triangle angle involving him, John Cena, and Eve Torres. The angle saw Eve leave Zack for John Cena, and Kane beating up Zack on multiple occasions, including that painful-looking wheelchair push off of the stage. Zack would toil away on shows like Superstars and Main Event for the next few years until he was surprisingly entered into the Intercontinental Championship ladder match at WrestleMania 32 and won? Zack would recount later in an interview with Chris Van Vliet that he wasn't even in the mix for that match until one day Vince happened to look up at the monitor during a Superstars taping and said, "Why aren't we using this guy more?" He would win the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 32 only to lose it to The Miz the next night, and his WWE career never seemed to recover after that. He would receive his release in 2020 as one of WWE's many controversial pandemic releases. He has since decided to go by his real name of Matt Cardona, where he has reinvented himself, making appearances for AEW, TNA, the NWA, MLW, and several notable larger indies including GCW, where he stepped into the realm of deathmatch wrestling. Number 1. Razor Ramon. You'd think that a member of the Clique and one of the men responsible for kicking off the Monday Night Wars would have been a main eventer, right? But believe it or not, Scott Hall, especially during his Razor Ramon days in the WWE, was held back from the main event spot. During his time as Razor Ramon, he famously never entered the Royal Rumble and was the perennial Intercontinental Champion for his time. Scott Hall would recount in a later interview that this is ultimately what led him to jump to WCW in 1996. In that interview, Hall told the story of sitting down with Vince McMahon and asking if he was, quote, ever going to be more than the Intercontinental title guy. To which Vince tried to spin the situation by telling Hall that people loved him as an Intercontinental Champion. It was at that point that Hall decided to take a contract offered to him by WCW to jump ship, eventually leading to the formation of the NWO. Disagree with our list? Bring it on down in the comments and hit subscribe for more.